So if I am Bob Iger, CEO of Disney, I have my hands full. I'm trying to figure out what to do with ESPN, what to do with my linear business. Let's talk about ESPN. Um, some months back, he talked about looking at strategic alternatives for the linear business, which means sell the linear business. The ESPN is sort of or was at one point, the crown jewel of the linear business. And so if Bob Iger is going to make ESPN a standalone, pure play streaming company by 2025, which is what he said publicly, by 2025 at the latest. The issue he's got is that ESPN doesn't own any sports content outright. I mean, they have the licensing rights to be the exclusive broadcaster for certain content like the UFC, but they don't own content. So if ESPN is going to be a streaming pure play and is going to have to go out and acquire the rights for sports content, it's going to be a problem for ESPN because ESPN is a small fish. You've got Google paying $14 billion for the right to broadcast NFL Sunday Ticket on YouTube for 5 years. Apple's out there at Major League Soccer, and Apple obviously has deep pockets, just like Google. So if you think about companies like Apple, Google, all the big tech firms, Amazon with Thursday night NFL games, Facebook, I don't recall what they may have. They had Red Zone at one point. They may have had Sunday Ticket for YouTube. I can't remember. But if you look at big tech, they all have demonstrated interest at some point in the past few years in sports. Live sports is still sort of the number one draw for audience. And so if you're any of the big tech firms, whether it be a social media company like Meta or Microsoft's closed the Activision deal, or Google, or any of the aforementioned companies, and you want to acquire content for your streaming platform, your respective streaming platform, well, you get deeper pockets than Disney. You have a much larger balance sheet than Disney. And post-spin, I'm not sure what ESPN's balance sheet is going to look like. Presumably it will be able to tap into Disney to a degree, but it's going to have to stand on its own. So it's not going to be able to compete for prime content if it's going to have to bid against Apple and Microsoft and Google. So that's the issue insofar as I could see. If ESPN truly is going to go out on its own by 2025, we've written a number of articles. I'll link to them in the show notes here. So Disney is going to have to either acquire content prior to spinning out. So one option would be acquire Endeavor. Endeavor, EDR, is the ticker symbol, is the parent company of the UFC, which Disney's partnered with for, I think they're coming up on either year 4, year 5 they're in right now, that deal. I think it's a 7-year deal. So if you're Disney, you could acquire Endeavor and put that in the ESPN portfolio. Another way to go about it, and Iger a couple of weeks ago said he was having conversations around this, which is you could partner. And who knows what a deal structure would look like. Could be a joint venture, could be a partial equity stake, but potentially if you're Disney, you reach out, and I believe they have several months ago, you reach out to the different sports leagues, and maybe you could work some deal with like an NFL, for example, where you create a joint venture. You acquire content from the NFL at a favorable price. You help the NFL extend its reach, extend its audience. The issue is, if you're Disney / ESPN, what do you bring to the table to the NFL, let's say, in terms of reach? I mean, you have expertise around marketing. You do have an audience, so you do bring that, but you don't really bring distribution. Distribution's really the cable companies, or it's the Apples, Google, Meta, Microsoft. Those guys could push your content through their platform. Amazon does quite a bit of this. Amazon has its own content that it produces. It acquired MGM, which is now part of the Amazon portfolio, obviously. But Amazon's been the one to really work partnership deals to distribute third-party content, so they're good at it. They've got some muscle there. Apple's yet to develop that muscle, but they certainly have the balance sheet to do it if they wanted to. So if you're ESPN, you could work on a distribution deal with one of the large streaming companies. You could try to partner with one of the content companies. But that's the real weakness these guys have, is they just don't own sports content outside of the old boxing library they acquired some years ago. So while Iger is distracted with trying to sort out ESPN, he's got a Disney problem on the streaming side, where they need to ramp up their slate of movies. What they're doing is actually paring back in terms of production for not only theaters but for streaming, in an effort to save capital. Iger's squeezed a little bit between a rock and a hard place. They should have run full speed ahead in terms of new content development to push through Disney Plus. But instead of accelerating content production, Iger finds himself trying to create cost saves on the Disney Plus side, because he's got broadcast fees that are going to be going away. So a revenue stream is going to evaporate as he unbundles ESPN from the traditional cable network to make it a pure play streaming platform. So frankly, it's a mess. And what Iger may be doing, I hope this is what he's doing. I hope he's trying to get deals in place such that he can create a framework for the enterprise value for Disney, some of the parts. So ESPN, we have this deal in place. It values our content at X with such and such a partner. So there's a value for ESPN should Disney want to sell it. On the Disney Plus side, you could comp it to Netflix with some discount. So there's sort of a sum of the parts valuation for Disney, so that when 2024 rolls around and it looks like maybe we'll have a change in the White House and perhaps usher in an administration that will be more friendly to big deals, then at least you'll have sort of a valuation structure in place to get a deal done to sell the entire company. So my guess is that Iger went out back in, I think it was May, he started talking about strategic alternatives for Disney. He probably got lowballed on the company as a whole. Probably got lowballed on the sum of the parts valuation, because my guess is when he got lowballed on the whole, he talked about selling pieces and got lowballed on that. Nobody wants to acquire Disney until they figure out what it's going to look like post pulling ESPN out of the linear TV bundle. What is that revenue model going to look like? What is that profit model going to look like? So I can get my arms around valuation. So my guess is Iger didn't receive a warm reception in the marketplace when he tried to sell Disney early this year. So now he's putting deals in place again to try to create a valuation around the different pieces of the business. And hopefully that will create a glide path for him to sell the company in 2024. And I wrote about this before. The reason why I think 2024 is a time when a deal gets done is, if you assume there's a change in the administration, we've got to believe that a GOP White House, a GOP FTC will be more friendly to big deals, because the talk around Los Angeles was a couple of months ago from people who supposedly bid on the deal was that what Disney's most concerned with is they want to ensure that if they create a framework for a sale of the company, Disney wants to be sure that that sale is going to be executed. They want to make sure the deal goes through. Bob Iger doesn't want to spend the next several years of his life in court with the FTC, having to sell off bits and pieces of the business in order to get closure on his deal. So you could put a framework in place and just not announce a merger agreement, announce an acquisition until a later date. But you can work on structure now. These things don't happen overnight. Deals take a long time. Sometimes small ones take longer than large ones, but this one's complex and there's a lot of moving parts. And it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. But the immediate problem for Iger is that ESPN doesn't own content. And he's going to be losing a revenue stream when the linear broadcast fees go away, once ESPN's pulled out of the bundle. So not an envious position. That's all for now. See you next time.